Welcome to SolFul Connections, where we skip the small talk and head right into the soul talk. I'm Amanda Solar, and each week we share the kinds of stories that remind us we're not alone. It's about being human, raw and unfiltered, just real talk. Let's connect.
Connection. Let's talk about connection.
So I'm here with Kevin Henry, and Kevin has worked in diversity and inclusion. He has worked in trauma-informed education, in media, communication, and training. And if I have this right, Kevin, you've done this for over 3 decades.
Yeah, more than that, really. Probably 4 decades, because I was in my early 20s. Well, I started off as a journalist in my early 20s when I was still in college. So, and I'm in my, let's just say I'm over 60 now. Believe it or
So, okay, I have been
not.
following you for a while, and I have to say, your posts always either make me think or they show how much you appreciate your family. There's like this really nice balance between family and purpose and thoughtfulness
Mm.
in what you share. So it all intrigues me. But before we dive in, I would just love to know what has made you smile recently, like a real just feel good smile.
Well, that's pretty easy. There's a lot of things that I smile about, but we have a new grandchild who is now just turned 6 months. And I mean, I've been around a lot of babies, a lot of grandkids, but for some reason, this particular grandchild, it's so animated and so, I mean, she's got all these facial expressions and she just talks and laughs. And so sometimes it's just the simplest things that really, I think, can bring you joy. I just laugh at her and I do funny voices and she laughs at me, and so that kind of thing's going on all the time. So, and then when she starts crying, I just give her to my wife or give her to her mom.
There
So
you go.
I'm a fair weather grandpa.
You know what? Speaking of fair weather, you're in Washington, and we were just talking about the weather in Washington and how it's not often what I would classify as fair weather, but did you grew up in LA? Is that
Right.
so? What was that like for you? What was childhood like for you? What kind of kid were you?
Well, I was an only child, and I didn't start. Well, that's another story. But I was. Let's just say I was an only child, and it was in the '60s, and so I grew up. Fortunately for me, I grew up in a very racially diverse environment, and I say that because in the '60s there was a lot of racial unrest and civil rights movements and violence and all kinds of really bad things happening. I think what helped me and sheltered me a bit was living in LA. I was somewhat insulated or protected from, say, what was going on in the South at the time.
Mm.
So I grew up in a heavily Jewish area. So a lot of my friends were white Jewish kids. We had a real mixed group of kids, black kids, Hispanic kids, Asian kids, Jewish kids. And I think that really helped me appreciate the differences even at a young age.
Yeah.
And so I basically had a fairly happy childhood. I really was blessed to have two wonderful parents who were very stable, very loving, great role models. And I mean, I always appreciated them, but I think as an adult, especially the kind of work that I've been doing, I really appreciate it because I've interviewed and been exposed to and worked with so many adults who came from very dysfunctional, abusive childhoods. So I guess I was very blessed and very lucky, I guess. And I was generally happy. I got into drama at a very well in high school. So that I think I had a lot of fun doing that.
So the work that you do now, when you say you have exposure to people that have had that kind of challenging growing up, what is that work? Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. So I, like a lot of people, have many hats. So one hat I have is that I'm a employee, trainer, consultant. I'm the person who you have to go to the mandatory, conflict mediation,
Yeah.
inclusion, team building, those kinds of things. I
Yeah.
lead those kinds of workshops and facilitate those kinds of workshops. I work at Volunteers of America doing that, but I also have my own consulting business, KPH Media, where I come in to a lot of organizations who are working with very diverse populations, but also dealing with internal issues among staff, conflict going on between staff members, people wanting to quit their jobs. So I work as a team builder, but also as a mediator in that sense, and that's where my trauma informed training comes in. Is that I really, rather than just coming in and lecturing people, I really like to try and take them on a journey of learning, so to speak, where they can appreciate, oh, I didn't know that about Amanda. That explains why Amanda maybe treats me a certain way. So
Yes.
that's where that empathy and the team building and that. So I'm a trainer, but I'm
Yeah.
also a freelance journalist and a podcaster. And I interview a lot of domestic violence survivors, survivors of sex trafficking, human trafficking. I put on public town hall type events where we've talked about how to support former prostitutes, people who have been incarcerated, people who have been trafficked. I was on the board of a anti-trafficking organization for a while, and so I guess that's where I've come in contact with a lot of those kinds of people.
Yeah. That's really interesting. So you were a kid who was really involved with theater, right? And then how did that path kind of wind its way toward the work you're doing now?
Well, I think it was a couple of things. As a journalist, I was, I think to be a good journalist, or at least in my case, I felt what helped me was I'm curious. I was
Mhm.
always a curious kid. Why do people act the way they do? Why did Amanda do what she did? Those kinds
Yes.
of things. I'm a creative writer. I write short stories. So I'm always into like character development and
Yeah.
being in drama as a teenager, we studied character development. Why is that? Why is the protagonist doing this to the antagonist? So I
Yes.
have this kind of natural curiosity. I worked for the city of Bellevue, which is a suburb of Seattle, for 20 years, managing their diversity, equity, inclusion program. I came in contact with a lot of people from different walks of life. And I think a couple of things I've appreciated, and I think drove me to the kind of work that I do, is again being exposed to. I grew up with two great parents in
Yep.
middle class environment. I'm meeting people who have been homeless, drug addicts, ex prostitutes, and I'm going, wow, whatever I can do to help these people, because I've been blessed, I want to do. I think I have a particular passion about domestic violence. And I mentioned I didn't start off as an only child, but
Mhm.
I had two siblings, half brother and sister, who were murdered by their stepfather when they were children.
Oh
And when I
God.
was 3, they were 13 and 10. So I have a particular uh,
Wow.
I don't know, passion around
Yeah.
sensitivity around domestic violence and any kind of abuse. So I
Yeah.
think my own personal experience again helps drive that.
So, yeah, I was actually listening to you thinking, oh, I wonder if Kevin's parents were like extremely compassionate people. I was wondering where that compassion gene came from or leaning and also then you just told me that story. So I'm wondering um, how you kind of held that information when you were younger.
Well, it was, and my parents, you mentioned they were very compassionate, loving people, but they were also somewhat traditional in the sense that the old school parents, like
Yeah.
you protect your kids. There's only thing, kids only need to know so much, and
Yeah.
you never fight in front of the kids and that kind of thing. So all I knew growing up is that when I was 3 years old, I vaguely remember, and I have some photos too of my sister and brother being at like my birthday parties. And because they lived
Yeah.
somewhere else, because my father had been married before, so his
Right.
ex-wife got remarried to this man
I
who turned out to
see.
be, well, extremely disturbed and violent, let's just say.
Right.
So it was like I'd see them every maybe once a month. They'd come by, and I'm 3 and they're older. So I'm their little
Right.
brother. Then all of a sudden, it's like I hadn't seen them in a long time. And then my parents didn't say anything. And then finally they said, oh, they've passed away in a fire. And
Wow.
I'm finding this out more like when I'm 6 or 7 years old, really.
Right.
And then later on, as an adult, I found out the real story, what had actually happened, which was basically the stepfather had sorry to be so graphic, but
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
basically murdered them and then set the house on fire to
Wow.
hide the crime. That's what I found out as an adult. So I think if anything, I felt a big sense of loss of like, wow, wouldn't it have been great to grow up with these two
Yes. Right.
brothers,
Because there
sisters?
you are, an only child.
Yeah, but then I thought, wow, how did my father deal with that?
Oh my
Because he
gosh.
never really mentioned
Wow.
it. The only thing
Yeah.
he said was because he passed away in 1999 is he said, "Well, I'm going to go and be with the kids now."
Wow.
And their pictures were in the living room the whole time.
Cannot begin to imagine, you know, he must have been somebody who kept things close because,
Yeah.
that's a lot to not be sharing regularly,
Well, and I'm Christian, and my parents were very devout Christians as well, and I think their faith really helped them deal with that
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so what keeps you anchored in this work? Because this is heavy. A lot of this is heavy work. And
Mhm.
even if it's not as heavy, when you're talking about people and why they do what they do and how do you resolve these issues, that's very complex and can be really deep work. What keeps you anchored in it? And do you get tired
Well,
of it?
oh yeah, we call it compassion fatigue. And
Yeah.
I suffer from that at least probably once a week for at least a few, well, sometimes an entire day. I think what happens is it's very, very heavy. And I think what intensifies it, the feeling of sometimes like, why even bother, or boy, this is tiring, is when you don't see any progress, or
Yeah.
when you see society kind of dismissive about certain things. I think that's
Yeah.
probably a real pet peeve of mine is when, and this is where the empathy training comes in, is where you come and tell me about your life. And I kind of go, well, Amanda, it could be worse. And just, count your blessings and
Yeah.
just, toughen up
Yeah.
and stop crying and uh, think of the bright side. Well, sometimes
Right.
there is no bright side. So,
Right.
but on the other hand, what keeps me anchored, I think, is in right when I'm really getting fatigued, I'll hear of a success story, or I'll get an email and somebody says, "Thank you so much for referring me to that shelter." And, I took my daughter there and now she got a job and all this other stuff. So then you go, okay, I guess it's all worth it.
Yeah.
The other thing I think that helps is that I will look at uh, things that I'm very fortunate to have, like a good family. Then I think about people I've lost. I've lost several people that are younger than me by, through cancer, and I mean things like that. And I think, wow, I feel like maybe I'm here for a purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. So, do you have certain practices or rituals or things that you do to kind of decompress or remove yourself?
Well, this is probably going to sound really ridiculous, but I am a huge fan of the Three Stooges.
Oh my gosh, so is my husband, may I just
Is
say.
that right? Okay. Well, see, I like him already. Well, and I think it for some reason I'll sit there and watch those old shorts on YouTube or on TV, and it's ridiculous of grown men throwing pies at each other, and things like that. But I guess it just kind of
Yeah.
it's mindless slapstick, ridiculous comedy. So it allows me to rest my brain,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I think what happened, your brain just keeps going and going and going, and you gotta just do something that's at the opposite end of the spectrum.
100%. 100%. Um, That's so funny. I'll have to share that because my husband takes such pride in the fact that Larry Fine's sister taught some of my husband's siblings. Anyway, that's his claim to fame.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. I've even got Mo Howard's autobiography,
But that's
you
really
know,
cool.
and I guess I'm a fan maybe because I grew up as a TV child,
Yes.
watching those old sitcoms, and then
Yes.
I had a job as a page at CBS
Oh,
TV
that's cool.
in the late 70s when I was in college, and I met some of these old actors who would come be on talk shows
Yes.
and I guess I
That's
grew up
cool.
watching I Love Lucy, you know, and that kind of thing. You just
Yes.
kind of grow up on that. It kind of stays with you, I guess.
Yeah, and then I think even if you see something like that as an adult, you kind of go back to that simpler day or that simpler time. It just kind of it's like if you played an instrument as a child and then you play that instrument, I think it just kind of takes you someplace or settles you in some way. Oh, that's really interesting.
Mm.
So music, that's because I did notice that you music seemed to have such a role in your life. Can you
Yes.
share the role of music in your life?
Well, I am not a musician, even though there's very few things that I blame my parents for not doing. One was not making me stay with the piano. You know, I was taking piano
Yes.
lessons, but I didn't start till I was 12. And it's like, do I want to go outside and play baseball? Or do I want to stay with the
Right.
piano? I want to go outside. So I just never did. But at the same time, being an only child, I would spend hours and hours in my bedroom listening to albums. Remember that word?
I
And
do.
reading the credits and getting
Yes.
to know the musicians. And at 13 or 14, I'm thinking, wouldn't it be great if I could actually sit down and talk to these people that are on these albums, right?
Yeah.
Well, by thanks to my cigarette smoking habit, and I'll get to that in a second. You'll probably go, what is he talking about? I wound up being a reporter for a newspaper in LA, a journalist, and interviewing a lot of the people whose albums I would listen to as a
Oh, that's
teenager.
so cool.
So I had a love of music. It really kept me company, being an only child. Staying in my room and just, in fact, my mom would tell me, "Oh, you know, we had this big birthday party for you when you were 6 years old. You went in your room and we're playing these 45s, and while the other kids are having a party."
So if your life were like a soundtrack, what songs would be on what songs would be on it? Like what were you listening? What was on those 45?
Oh, wow. I remember certain groups and people that I actually got a chance to interview: Earth, Wind, and Fire, Ray Charles,
Wow. So cool.
James Brown, Motown, some of the Motown artists, some of the songwriters from Motown. Wow, if I certain songs that, well, I guess certain songs like Rainy Night in Georgia, which is by Brooke Benton, wonderful singer who died way too young. I remember listening to that as like 9, 10 years old, and it created these kind of imagery. I think a good song creates images in your
Yeah.
head, like a radio drama, like an old radio show.
Yeah.
So it was very kind of melancholy kind of song. A lot of the Motown, I think a lot of the Motown songs and certain songs mirrored my dating life when I started dating my early 20s. A lot of breakups,
Yeah.
highs and lows, you can't hurry love, just certain songs just kind of, I want to hold your hand even, I mean, just
Yeah.
the adolescent, crush type stuff. And then I would play certain songs when I'd get dumped, I'd play certain songs,
Yeah.
Ray Charles blues songs.
It's funny because you're just making me think. I think sometimes music or art, you know, it kind of it goes to a place where your words don't always get to go.
I
Yes.
think Benny and the Jets kind of stands
Oh,
out in mine
yeah.
because I was very much into it was a whole kind of a fantasy character of the kind of ultimate rock star kind of thing. And
Yeah.
as a kid, I was into that.
Yes. Yeah. Do you remember that album by Elton John, Captain Fantastic?
Oh, and the Brown Dirt Cowboy.
Yes. And when you said like the magic, I just remember seeing this album and it kind of folded out and it had all of these pictures on it. And
Well,
yeah,
yeah, those were the days when you buy albums and they had pictures. I mean, they were like little books. You had all the
yeah,
musicians listed, that kind of thing. Um, and now I don't know. Well, I get everything off the internet. I don't get any of that. I have to go to Wikipedia and things. Even though Wikipedia is pretty good about telling you who plays on what songs nowadays.
yeah. Yeah, that's funny because you mirror my husband in that too. He loves to know like who is the producer and who's
Mhm.
the, you know, all of those little pieces. Whereas I'll just listen to the song and sing along
Uh-huh.
and be content with not knowing any other thing but the singer, maybe the
Yeah.
songwriter. But that's really cool that you got to interview people.
Oh,
That's
it's very,
fun.
very exciting. And I got to ask him questions that I always wanted to ask him. I'm sitting there going, I'd like to ask this question. Why did you do the song this way? And how many takes did it take to I mean, because I was invited to a few recording sessions, which I was very excited about. But then I realized, I said, this is very tedious
Oh,
because these guys, I mean, these were professionals, but they would spend an entire day on one half of a song. And I'm sitting there going, sounds all right to me. And they said, no, 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 let's do that again. Let's do this again. Let's do that again. I'm like, thinking, what's wrong with it? They said, well, the saxophone is out of tune or something, things like that.
yeah. So do you have is there any interview with anyone, doesn't have to be a musician, but that just really stands out in your memory?
Well, there were several. I think one that stands out comes to mind is Patti LaBelle. I was, again, I'm in my early 20s, and they sent me out for the newspaper, sent me out, interview Patti LaBelle. I knew who she was. I love Patti LaBelle. And I had this kind of, you're trying to be professional, even though you're a fan of certain people, you don't
Yes.
want that to seep into the interview. So you're there very kind of businesslike almost, hello, Miss LaBelle, da 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 da. Well, she runs up to me and gives me a big kiss on the lips. And she says, Kevin, it's so good to see you. And she gives me this big hug. And I'm like thinking, have I met her before?
Oh my
Uh,
gosh, that's really
and then
cool.
she says, well, before we do the interview, I want to order a bottle of wine. And, so she orders a bottle of wine. So I'm sitting in this really swank hotel room with Patti LaBelle drinking wine and getting paid for it. So that
That's
kind of comes to
really
mind.
cool.
And James Brown comes to mind. He was quite a character.
Oh, what was he like?
Well, he's a great interview, or was, because he's kind of like Muhammad Ali. I used to love Muhammad Ali because he's always a great interview because he's always going to say these just really outrageous things. And so I asked, I'm
Yeah.
being very professional, and I said, Mr. Brown. And this is when Prince and Rick James, another performer, were really kind of taking off, and they were borrowing a lot of musicality from James Brown. And I said, well, James Brown, Mr. Brown, what do you think of Prince and these new artists, Prince and Rick James? And he said, that's nothing new. It's just me. They're just copying me. I'm the best. I mean, he's just kind of going off. Then he tells me, because again, I'm this young man all buttoned up, and he says, something, you're a fine young man, but if you really want to pick up the ladies, you got to do your hair like me. So that kind of stands out.
You do such a good impression of him. So if you could, this proverbial question
Mhm.
that I never get sick of, I love this question for whatever reason. If you could get together, say with three other people for, you know, late night coffee, sit around
Uh,
and talking, dead or alive,
Ooh,
who would they be and why?
dead or alive? Well, I mean, I'd have to be my brother and sister.
Yeah.
I don't know if you were talking about entertainers necessarily.
No, it could be anybody. Yeah.
Probably Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Those three.
Yep.
Pretty heavy. I know I'm getting heavy again here.
I mean, I'm
You
sure
said dead or alive.
exactly 100%. I mean, if somebody says you get to be with anybody, yeah, that's a good three. That's a really good three. What about perceptions? So, what would you say people close to you, if they had to describe you, how would they describe you?
um, I think they think I have a good sense of humor. Laid back, easygoing, thoughtful. Those are the positives. Negatives might be disorganized.
Yeah.
um, what's the word? Well, I don't want to say uptight. That sounds like such an old word. There's
Reserved?
certain things.
Would it be reserved?
Well, no, not reserved. I get kind of tense or stressed out about like I like to get to the airport 3 hours early. Drives
Oh,
my
right.
wife crazy. She said, "Why
Right.
do we have to get here so early?" And I said, "Look, because all these things could happen. The TSA line could get backed up. There could be an accident on the freeway. Those kinds of things. So I can get a little obsessive compulsive about certain
Yeah.
things."
Yeah. I was telling my husband the other day, the thing that he does in an airport that drives me really crazy is that he acts as though somebody is chasing us. He is out ahead of us. He is
Mhm.
rushing. He is like, we've got to get. And I'm always like, we can kind of calm down right now. We can bring it down
Yeah,
15 notches. And he's like, out there, I got to get to whatever. And I'm like, yeah, I think we could take it down a couple of
yeah,
notches. But
yeah. I think your husband and I have a lot in common.
I know that's really true. Three Stooges, music.
Airport anxiety.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. As a matter of fact, even on vacation, sometimes I go, listen, we can take it easy if we get to wherever we're going late. It's actually okay. It's really okay. And it usually settles in, but
Mhm.
yeah, maybe it's a guy thing, Kevin. I'm like,
Maybe.
or
I do have a thing about time. Yeah, that's another thing is that even when, I mean, sometimes, of course, it matters. I mean,
yeah.
if something's
Yeah.
like the movie starts at a certain time, I definitely want to be there before it starts. But other times when it's just like, oh, well, we're going to drop by somebody's house,
Yeah.
right? And I'd say 4 o'clock, then I will stress out if it's 2 minutes after four, even though it really wouldn't matter if it were 20 minutes after four.
No, my husband has like a strange relationship with time, but if we go to Puerto Rico and my husband is Puerto Rican,
Mhm.
he's Puerto Rican via North Philly. But if we go to Puerto Rico,
That's interesting. Puerto Rican
so he's
via North Philly.
North Philly. So, but if there's a different relationship with time, there really is. So if we go to a restaurant and they say it's going to open at 5, it might actually open at 6. It
Mm.
might not open at, and my husband's like, oh my gosh, they said we've got to be there by such and such. And I'm
Yeah,
always like, no,
the
it'll
same
be
way.
okay.
I think my father kind of influenced me because he was that way. He was
Yeah.
well, he's very organized, but if the auto shop said it opened at 8, he was there at 7:58. When the garage door goes up,
Yes.
he was always sitting there,
Oh, right.
like with looking at the watch.
Oh my gosh. So what did your parents do for a living?
Well, my father was a mailman. He worked two jobs. That's another thing. I think the work ethic. I'll probably drop dead when I'm, from work at some point. But
Yeah.
he was a mailman, and then he was also a truck driver for 30 years. So he would
Um,
get up in the morning at 4 in the morning. He would work a route, like the mailman, up and down the street. And then he would get off at like 12, and then he would go to a second job as a truck
Wow.
driver locally and work until 6, come home, be home by 7, go to bed by 8, get up and do it all over again. So my mom was a legal secretary, and then she got a job at a big church, and so where she was like one of the administrative secretaries. So they both worked their whole lives, really.
I mean, yeah, no wonder you liked TV when you were little because they were both really busy.
Oh yeah, I'd come home and I'd be home by 3:30, and my mom, I think, would come home about 5:30 or 6 a lot of times, and
Yeah.
I've watched all those afternoon shows.
Yes. Yes. You must have been very independent.
Yeah, very probably too independent sometimes, some people would say.
Yeah. 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 Is there anything as we kind of close up? You've worked with so many people talking about diversity. What types of diversity I would have to imagine if you're
Right,
talking about HR?
right.
Should we know about it? What should we know about diversity? Especially, I think, in this time where people seem to be so uncomfortable,
Yeah, great
hearing
question.
this.
Well, I think for me, it's really all about attitude. and one of the sayings that a lot of our trainers use in particular is you don't know what you don't know, or we don't know what we don't know. And it never ends. I mean, I've learned more about history, for instance, in the last 4 or 5 years than all my years in high school, middle school, and elementary school, in terms of just so many things that I didn't know about history and about different people that connect to the
Yeah.
present. And I think that that's where people, a lot of us, and we all like our comfort zones. You
Yeah.
have your little circle of friends, you go to the same grocery store. Everything's people like consistency. But I think it keeps us naive or ignorant in a lot of
Yeah.
ways of what other people are going through. So I encourage people to be curious, and and empathy really comes from walking in another person's shoes. So like I tell people even in my trainings is that, okay, fine, you can go to a Thai restaurant, you can watch a movie about the Philippines, whatever, but
Yeah.
still what you really should do is get out of your comfort zone, which is usually pretty homogenous for most people, and go and be a minority for a day. Go somewhere where you're the only person like you, and you have to navigate. And so I think that's not a punishment, but I think it opens people's eyes.
Yeah.
And I think once their eyes are open, I think they can learn things about other people that start to humanize people, and they stop becoming just a person that they see on the news. I saw this when we were doing a lot of events after 9/11. There was a lot of anti Muslim behavior, hostility,
Mhm.
and I remember I lived in Seattle, and there was my neighbors were Muslim, and they came over and brought me some food one time. We had this long conversation, and I went, "Wow, we have so much in common."
Yeah.
We're,
Yes.
we're complaining about the same thing. The kids are acting up, whatever it is. And I said, so a lot of times there's more similarities than we really realize, but we can't learn that until we actually get out of our comfort bubble and interact with people. Because I think the internet, I love the internet, but it can make us lazy. You
100%.
never have to leave your house.
Yeah, and it can also provide kind of a vacuum, the internet,
The
you don't
algorithm.
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, that's a really great point. And I think, it's also really kind of fun and exciting to expand
Mhm.
our lives and our eyes and our perceptions really. Plus, let me tell you, I would have to think with what you do, it probably makes work a lot more enjoyable if you can kind of figure out a way to
Mhm.
enjoy working with the people with whom you're working, even if you take it just so specific as something like that.
Yeah, I would say most of the time I'm enjoying myself. I mean, at times you get frustrated or you get challenged. And as a consultant, a trainer, sometimes you're brought into situations where the people are there for the mandatory training.
Oh
So
my
they're
goodness.
it's not like they're hostile, but they're not fully there.
100%. I interviewed somebody who has written a book on change, and she goes into corporations to talk about change. So the people at the top of the organization are like, "Come in, we're doing all of these changes, make everybody be okay with change."
Mhm. Yeah.
And it's kind of a thankless task. There's so much nuance. So Kevin, well, first of all, you said that you had a podcast. Can people find your podcast?
Yes, but I would say it's called All the Way Authentic. And I would suggest, though, going to kevinphenry.com. The reason why I say that is it's on different platforms, but and I need to work with my assistant because it's like you go to one platform, it's like they all seem to be there, but then you go to another platform and there's one's missing.
Yes.
So I just say go to the website and there's a link that just kind of takes you to all of them. But it's
Perfect.
about authenticity. It's like living your authentic life. Life, it's too short to live your life according to somebody else's script that they wrote for you.
Perfect message. Love it. I'm going to just end it there. I think that's a great message on which to leave it, Kevin. And I'll put a link in the show notes to your website so that people
Oh,
can
wonderful.
click on that.
Appreciate that.
Thank
Great.
you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, thanks so much for listening. Thank you for being a valued part of the Soulful community. Thank you to William Aronson for writing, recording, and producing the Soulful Connections theme song. And finally, always know you're not alone. We are connected. We're all in this thing together, and you and your story are important. Let's just keep on connecting.